autoimmune disease, and his body was attacking himself. So medicine wanted to put steroid cream on him to tame the inflammation. And the mama in me was like, no way, what's the root cause? And then I started digging and discovered that it was all started in the gut. So, and this whole wellness nutrition aspect just kind of took a natural, real progression with our lives. Because when we started eating anti-inflammatory and cutting out the inflammatory foods for my son's health, I had spin-off as well. I mean, I dropped weight without counting calories or being hungry. My skin cleared up, and just I had a lot more energy and mental clarity. And I just noticed that at parties and gatherings, I was like crazy talking about food. And everyone was like, well, you know, why don't you do this for a living, right? So it just kind of unfolded.
That's amazing. And like, you've taken it so many amazing places too. Like, you often talk about how, about the wisdom in food, or like how, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, I talk about the energy of food and the vibration of food now. So while what you eat does matter, and I'm not saying it doesn't, and I choose to eat certain foods deliberately, and I avoid certain foods deliberately, but there's no real right or wrong healthy way per se. So I teach basic principles of, food categories, anti-inflammatory, inflammatory, but then there's a whole other category of the energy behind your food and how you're feeling and how you treat your body. Let me give you guys an example. You may know some people that are very strict with what they eat. They're organic only, they're vegan, they just, count everything, watch everything, are really hyper vigilant about what goes in their body. And they're exercising and they're doing quote unquote everything right. But they're still suffering with headaches and backaches and body image problems, and they aren't really well per se, right? And then others on the flip side, you may know some of these people. I know I certainly have run across them, that they smoke a pack of cigarettes a day, they drink alcohol, they're eating sausages and bacon, and they're like happily living, and they're going on to be like 80 years old, and you're going, this does not make sense. What gives, right? So that's when I discovered there was way more to it than what you were eating. And if you eat something and you feel guilty about it, or you tell yourself it's going to make you fat, it will. So our power of the mind is massive. And I started expanding this into my family. Some quick little things we do is a guided light meditation, just to really ground ourselves, really be in our bodies, experience our bodies and out of our minds and out of the chatter. Another thing I really like to do is, while I'm cooking, I will visualize spreading love and light to the food. So when I'm sprinkling things on and seasoning things, it's like I'm putting an extra love in there, because if you're in the kitchen and you are chopping and angry and you've just had a fight or you've just yelled at someone, that energy goes into your food. And let me expand with an example on this. Have you ever noticed that if you may have taken a recipe off of Pinterest or, your favorite book or whatever, and you follow it to the T, you measure it out, it's going to be great, and really it just is kind of disappointing and a bit of a flop. And then there's another day where you're just kind of like, I'm not really sure what we're eating, but let me just go to the fridge. I'll pot this, I'll pot that, toss this in. And it tastes like so good, because it's the energy behind, and you can't even replicate that meal again, actually.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that, because I feel like our thoughts and our beliefs and our energy in the moment really, really does impact how our food tastes. And like, I've actually seen that in restaurants too, where like you can tell what kind of mood the chef is in that day based on what you get, and some of it obviously is based on the quality of the ingredients and making sure that you do the methods correctly and so forth. That obviously changes the taste of the meal. But I really think that there's something to how much love or mindfulness you put into that meal, and how much you like believe that that you're doing it from this place of like love and giving, as opposed to like resentment or anxiety, even like, oh, I hope I'm doing this right. And this, like it has to be like a sense of flow for the meal to have that sense of flow too.
Exactly. And if you can think back about, just because McDonald's is like every corner kind of thing, those meals, and I'm not saying every teenager in working there, but, often they're prepared from angry teenagers who've had a fight with their parent, or they've had a fight with their girlfriend or boyfriend, and they come to work and they just don't have a smile on their face, right? And they're just preparing that, and you're eating that. And granted, the ingredients matter, as we say, but there's another side where your grandmother is so excited to have you over. She's preparing this food with such love, and like, you just can't beat your grandma's cooking, right? Because it, like we talk about, it's the energy behind it, and it really matters.
Yeah. Yeah. I really, really think that there's something very powerful there. And I also feel like, there's so many of us who really struggle with cooking in general. Why? Because maybe there's fear, or there's like a sense of lack of time. So we're like always putting these efficiencies in, right? And even those efficiencies and like sort of short circuiting the process of cooking. Well, like I've seen people like try to braise like really quick. Like you even see that on Chopped, or you'll see that on cooking shows where they're like short circuiting these like long form cooking methods and trying to like do it in like 20 minutes. And it's almost like missing out on some of the slow cooking ideal in some ways. I don't know if you've experienced that too.
I agree. Like if if you're into like marinating food, and that's why a lot of times it tastes really well when it's marinated in certain kinds of ingredients, because it's had a chance to like add love to it, right? And some spice to it. And where if you're just quickly going through the motions all the time, and I think a lot of it is the overwhelm of cooking itself, and there's all that fear and worry behind it, and what am I going to do, and I've got this to do, and you're not in the moment though, right? So if we can get back to just, even here's another quick type of thing anybody can do, and you don't have to know anything about cooking, but if you can just even breathe like 3 slow deep breaths and really feel your lungs and really feel the air going through your nose and into your body and then back out again. I mean, that puts you in a different space, even though nothing's actually changed physically.
Right. Yeah, it's fascinating. I just finished this amazing book by Rachel Hers called Why We Eat What We Eat. And it has this whole section on our mood, and like people who are in love experience sweet foods as even sweeter, and how like there's all of our senses play a role in our perception of that food and how good it tastes or how sour it tastes. And they did all these studies. It's a fascinating book, but it's
really, that would be really cool.
Like really coincides with what you're talking about in terms of like how like if there's a lot more cortisol in your system, for instance, like food gets perceived as more sour or more bitter than if there's not cortisol. So it's so fascinating how even just being in a relaxation response while we're cooking and while we're eating changes the experience of that meal, and also the assimilation of nutrients too.
Yeah, and if we can view food as an act of self-love, like that we get to nourish our bodies. This is an opportunity to nourish my body, and because my body gives back to me all day, every day, not just like, what can I do to shut it up almost, and being in a hurry. And it's like, if you think about our basic needs, I view them as food, shelter, and clothing. That's all we quote unquote have to do. There's all these things we put on ourselves that we think we have to do, and we're losing out on actually food, clothing, and shelter, that we're not taking care of those aspects. And I don't mean that we don't have a house. I mean, most of us have somewhere to live, even if it's not a home. but it's like, are you taking care of that space? I mean, this is a bit of a sidetrack, but yeah, so food is one of our basic needs. So it's not something we should rush through or push through or ram through, right?
Exactly. I totally agree with you. And, you know, I wanted to ask you, you posted in the group last week um, about meal planning and about meal prep. And like, it got a lot of engagement. People like, how do you feel about meal planning? And everybody was like, well,
Yeah.
I would love to hear like some tips from you.
Yes.
I strive for meal planning, and I actually use a meal kit, a home meal kit delivery service called Purple Carrot, which is a vegan service, and they give me 3 meal kits per week, and each meal makes is enough for 2 people. So I have it for dinner, and then I have it for lunch the next day, and everything's like, well, I have to chop the vegetables and prepare and cook everything. But like if there's sesame oil, they'll give you like a little thing of sesame oil. They'll give you the exact amount of
Okay.
herbs. They'll give you the exact amount of whatever. So you're not like measuring everything. And for me, it's been a game changer, because for me, meal planning, it's never been about the actual cooking is never the issue. For me, the issue is deciding what to eat. That's always the hard part. Like, what should I make? What should I eat? And the second part is making sure we have the ingredients, and then taking that time to prep it, so that you're creating efficiencies in advance, so that you're not left with that, like, okay, let me open the fridge. Oh, what should I make? You know, like you've
And
got
then
to
you
be,
order pizza or something, or not you, but yeah.
yeah, or Chinese, you like to do Chinese takeout or whatever it is. So tell us a little bit about how you approach meal planning.
Okay. So a game changer for me with meal planning was to cook by themes.
Mm.
So that, and this is what I love about this plan, is that it can be made for your household. So I'll just give you an example. For Sundays, I'm generally home on Sundays. So that's the day I do my roasting. So those are the things I'm going to do in long cooking times, right? And things I kind of want to be home for. And then so if Sunday is not your day that you're home, don't plan your roasting vegetables or your roasting meat that day. You will do that on another day. And where Monday for me, well, actually, then on Tuesday, I'm not home because my children are in violin lessons. So for supper, for dinner, I'm not around. So this is where I do my to-go plan. So I will make out a thing like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, all the way to Saturday, decide on a theme, and based on the thing. So more themes that I would have would be like a Mexican theme. I would do, now this wouldn't work if you're vegan, but one night would be fish, right? Or another night would be Chinese, or you would just pick a theme that would fit into what you like. Because often when you buy a meal plan, it's like food that you don't actually enjoy, and it's like food you've never heard of, or tough ingredients, or it's just not to your taste. So if you pick food that you like, you might have an Indian theme for one night, right? So you just have, and then what I do is I make 3 variations. So, so for finger food for us, I usually do a sushi, a spring roll, and like a leftover. And actually a leftover day I have slotted in for Monday. So Mondays I do not cook. Saturdays I have slotted for my social day. So, because often we are going to my parents or my husband's parents or friends or a potluck or whatever. So that day I block off. So automatically I'm only down to 5 days. And if I can do one more leftover day in there because it makes it easy, you're down to 4 already. And if you know that Sunday's your roast day, Tuesday's your Monday's leftovers, Tuesday's your to-go food, then it just really takes the mind overwhelm out of it. So I know that it's Tuesday tomorrow, and I know I'm going to either pick sushi, spring rolls, or I'm going to just empty out my fridge, or sometimes I might try a new recipe. And this is the thing, you don't have to live to it so rigidly that you go, oh, I'm not following my plan, and then we have a slip, and then you feel bad about yourself, and you just have another reason to beat yourself up.
Right. And what would you say to the person who in our group, and chime in, wellness warriors, if you are one of those people that you just can't get it together in terms of like organizing. Like the week approaches, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I didn't shop, I didn't do this, I didn't do what I was supposed to do. Like, how do you get into a groove? How do you talk to the person who's less organized and less?
Yep.
And as this,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Yeah. So you have to make sure you have ingredients or you can't cook. So I always make sure that one day a week I do a grocery shop. For me, it's Wednesdays. That's the day I go into Brandon or my town, and I make sure that I have food. And to me, if you are not organized and if you do not like grocery shopping and it's like just one of those things that it's a tick box you do because you need to eat, go once a week and make sure you get enough. And a trick here is if you're buying fresh fruit or fresh vegetables, like if I'm buying bananas, I will buy like 4 or 5 bunches, and I will buy a couple that are ripe, a couple that are kind of green, and then that way you still have it to carry through. Or if I'm getting avocado, again, I will pick the different ripenesses so I'm carrying through. Now, by the end of the week, you're not necessarily eating, fresh strawberries because that just may not work out, but there's always food in your home, right? That you can get through, right? And because if you're spending like even half an hour going to get groceries all the time, that's just a long time. And the thing is, if you have food in your house, you can make something as quick or quicker than you can go through takeout or order something. Right. Because half of it is you gotta have food. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you map it out that, like, I don't know how many of your viewers, like what they eat as far as what they feel they eat. Personally, I'm not vegan. We eat chicken in our house. So on Monday or Sunday's my roast night. I know that I make sure I've got my potatoes, I've got my carrots, I've got my celery, I've got my rice, which, buy it that you can have. Like, that's a dry ingredient. It never goes bad. I've got the nori. Like, you have to do it. I don't know how you can't cook without ingredients. And if you're running around the grocery store, grabbing stuff all the time or you forget stuff. And the other thing I would say is be forgiving of what you're making. So just because a recipe calls for, I don't know, paprika or something that you don't necessarily have, like paprika is just like a bit of a flavor. So maybe add something, just even ground pepper to it, right? It doesn't have to be exact.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I think that does stymie people, where they'll get a recipe and they're excited to do it, but then they don't have that particular ingredient. And then they say, well, forget it, as opposed to like having the ingenuity or creativity, or even like flexibility and permission to be like, what is this like? What could replace this? And I've done that, and it's been a disaster. And I've done it, and I've created like masterpieces, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So you're absolutely right. Like, I think bringing that compassion and flexibility is super important too.
Yeah. And it might feel overwhelming to write out, like, if you think about this, I hope this doesn't feel overwhelming to people. Write out 7 days, Monday to Saturday or Sunday to Saturday or whatever. You can even think of like 3 even, because even if you didn't want to do 7, start with like thinking ahead about 3 meals that you could plan, right? And that way, at least you've got that covered per se. And, everyone eats. So what do you normally eat anyway? Like, what would be example of themes that you would have for yours?
Taco night,
right?
Pasta night with meat sauce or whatever. Like, we have our staples that the kids like, and
right. So
I make meat for my family. I just don't do it. I just don't eat it myself. So yeah.
So if you have like your pasta night, you already know that. Slip in a going out night. If you enjoy going out to eat, put that in as whatever night. Maybe it's Friday night for you guys, and then you're automatically going, it feels lighter because it's like a day off almost, So what to eat, it might take you maybe an hour to put this plan together, and maybe 2. But if you think about 2 hours of your life right now, compared to every day of preparing supper, it just will save you time in the end. So even if you don't feel like you're organized enough to write it out, it's like you're smart enough, you're good enough to put 7 days out there, think of 7 things you like to eat and roll with it. And then, in 3 months with the changing of the seasons, like, spring, summer, autumn, winter, you automatically get a variety, because in the winter you're going to eat more squash, you're going to eat more warming foods. In the summer you're going to eat more salad type. So it automatically brings variety and flavor because the foods are in season.
Yeah. So that's such a great point. And like that can happen, well, because of based on what you see in the stores, but it's also like just intuitively what we feel like eating. Like around this time I start craving gazpacho, for instance, and I never crave gazpacho in the winter because it's like a light, cold food, as opposed to like the soups and stews that I want in the winter time.
Yeah.
Yes. And like, I will just add, I mean, these are some amazing tips. For those who you're in Canada, right? So I don't know if they have that there, but there's something called Instacart here where you could literally type in your zip code and they have grocery stores and specialty stores that will deliver groceries to you. And you
Yeah.
can shop. I mean, it's hard with produce because you can't pick, feel and smell and everything. But for those in a crunch who like are feeling overwhelmed and don't have, access or ability or time to go to the grocery store, you can literally just type it in and they'll deliver it to you.
Yes, and we don't have that exact thing here, but there are stores, and my hometown is like 50,000 people. Like, it's not very big. You can click and carry and, just go pick it up, right? Or if there's things, that you can, even if it have a conversation in your home, like, who could do this, as a head of the household. You don't necessarily have to do everything, or if there's something else you can delegate and do the groceries. And I would say when you're doing the groceries, do them when you're already onto the way somewhere else in your vehicle, not that you have to go and get out and about again. And as far as the prep time, one really great hack is to prep while you're already in the kitchen. So for breakfast, a typical breakfast for us consists of rice cake, almond butter with slices of banana. That's what my son loves.
Yeah, well, you posted
that. My daughters, they eat oatmeal and they put chia seeds and raisins and cinnamon on it, and that's what they have. And they don't really tire of it very much. So while they're eating that, I maybe will eat it too, but I often eat a little bit later just because of my system. I will be like chopping onion for enough for lunch and supper, or I will be making sure that I'm making use of the time that we're already in the kitchen. So come supper time or dinner time, I'm not going, okay, I'm at the square one. I've got half of it done without spending any more time in the kitchen because it was already time I was going to spend in there anyway. Does that make sense?
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Actually, I have a course called The Consistency Cure, and it's all about like creating new, from a heart-centered place, like new behavioral changes and habit shifts. And what I call that is an anchoring technique. You do something that you already have in place that's really like grounded, and it's already
happens every day. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to do any special extra whatever to do it, and then you link the newer behavior with it. So for instance, like what you just said, as you're preparing the oatmeal and whatever, that's a good time, you just chop an onion too, or you do something else. So like I've had it like people as they're preparing their coffee also set up the blender to do their smoothie, as opposed to I had one gentleman who was like going to get breakfast burritos every day because he didn't know exactly when he was going to have time to do it. And so I'm like, well, what do you do every morning? Well, I always make coffee. Okay, you anchor it with the coffee making. You also have the blender out, or you have everything out the night before. Coffee, blender, and the ingredients are in the fridge and ready to go. So I love
that. And how, if you're thinking ahead about the dream life that you have, it's like, how would I be treating myself? How would I be eating? It's like you can do parts of that now, and we all have the same 24 hours in a day, right?
Yep, yep. And this has been so amazing. Such great tips. I think a lot of the people in Wellness Warriors will really, really appreciate these. And listen, you guys, if you're watching this on the replay, just give us a shout out. Lisa is really got some amazing tips. And Lisa, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
I have a Facebook page, Dr. Lisa Suski, Health Food Coach. There is hyphens, but if you look at my personal page, Lisa Suski, and then you can find my business page on there. And I've got a link to a free report on there about listening to your body's whispers and how to kind of eat more to what your body needs and not what everyone else says it needs.
Oh, I love that. That's so great. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. This has been really amazing, really helpful. And I know we'll see you in the group soon, too.
Sounds good. It's been great to be here. Thanks, Jenny.
Bye.
Bye.